Hello guys, welcome to my channel. So today in this video, we are going to learn about the anatomy of the human heart and the internal structure. Now what is heart? Heart is the main pumping organ of the human body. It is a hollow muscular organ, reddish brown in color. What about the size of the heart? It is of one's fist. Now heart lies in the mediastinum. What is mediastinum? It is basically the space between two lungs. The space between two lungs is called mediastinum, and it is the space where the heart lies. Now the heart is broader at the upper end, which is the base of the heart, and it is conical at the lower end, which is the apex of the heart. The conical end is slightly tilted to the left side and it rests above the diaphragm because the right lung is larger than the left lung. That's the reason the heart is tilted to the left side. Now, heart is enclosed in a membranous sac. This membranous sac, which encloses the heart, is called the pericardium. The pericardium, in fact, is made up of two layers. The outer layer of the pericardium is the fibrous layer, and the inner layer is the serous layer. So, the outer pericardium, this is the fibrous pericardium, and inner to the fibrous pericardium we have the serous pericardium. Now the serous pericardium in fact is made up of two layers. So this one is the outer pericardium, that is the fibrous layer, and this is the inner pericardium, which is the serous layer. Now this inner pericardium is in fact made up of two different layers. Now it is divided into two layers, of which the outer layer and the inner layer. The outer is the parietal layer and the inner is the visceral layer. The outer parietal layer is in continuity with the outer fibrous pericardium. The space between the outer parietal and inner visceral layer, there is a space, and this space is filled with a fluid. There is a fluid in this space. This space between the outer parietal and inner visceral layer is called as the pericardial space. And this pericardial space is filled with pericardial fluid. As you know about the lung as well, in the lungs also we have seen there is two layers, the outer parietal and the inner visceral, and there was a space which was called as the pleural space filled with pleural fluid. Similarly, in the heart as well, we have the outer parietal layer, inner visceral layer. Between them there is a space which is the pericardial space filled with pericardial fluid. Now one question which is very important over here, which you need to remember, is the amount of the pericardial fluid. The pericardial fluid is about 50 ml. 50 ml. Now this is a very important question in terms of NEET and as well as the boards. So you have to remember the amount of the pericardial fluid, which is 50 ml. This pericardial fluid actually acts as a shock absorber, and it protects the heart from mechanical injuries. Also, it keeps the heart moist because it is a water, right? So it keeps the heart moist and acts as a lubricant, protective, nothing but protective covering. The wall of the heart is made up of three layers. These three layers from outer to the inner side are as follows. So outer epicardium, the middle myocardium, and the inner endocardium. Now remember this, in bio the word outer or above is always represented by epi. So the prefix epi means something related to above or outer. The prefix endo is related to inside, the layer inside, the innermost layer. Okay, so we have epicardium, myocardium and endocardium. Now in fact the epicardium, the outermost wall of the heart, is in continuity with the inner visceral layer of the serous pericardium. The myocardium, the middle layer of the heart. Now this myocardium is responsible for contraction and relaxation of the heart. So the contraction and relaxation of the heart is dependent on the myocardium. This myocardium is made up of cardiac muscles, which are smooth muscles in the heart. The epicardium and the endocardium are protective coverings, and the myocardium is responsible for contraction and relaxation of the heart. This is important, and also remember that the myocardium is made up of cardiac muscles. Let's move on to the internal structure of the heart. Now, as you can see here in this diagram, the heart is made up of 4 different chambers. These 4 chambers have 2 upper chambers, the superior chambers, and 2 lower or inferior chambers. These 2 upper superior chambers are called the atria. So let's assume that this is the left part of the heart and this is the right part of the heart. So this becomes the left atrium, this becomes the right atrium. Similarly, this is the left ventricle and this is the right ventricle. So we have 4 chambers of the heart, 2 atria and 2 ventricles respectively. Now these 2 atria, they have thin walls. So these are thin walled structures, whereas the ventricles, they have thick walls. Even here you can notice that the left ventricle is 3 times more thicker than the right ventricle. The reason why this is 3 times more thicker than the right ventricle is because it has to pump oxygenated blood to different parts of the body. So this is something which you should remember, that the left ventricle is 3 times more thicker than the right ventricle. So these 2 thin walled chambers, these 2 are the thick walled chambers. Now the 2 atria are separated from each other by a septum. This septum between the 2 atria is called as the interauricular septum. Similarly, for the ventricles, these 2 ventricles are separated from each other by this septum. This septum is called as the interventricular septum. Here, the atria and the ventricle are also separated from each other by a septum. The septum between the atria and the ventricle, this septum is known as the atrioventricular septum. So these 4 chambers are separated from each other. Septum between the atria, interauricular septum, septum between the ventricles, interventricular septum, and the septum between the atria and ventricles is the atrioventricular septum. Okay, now the right atria and the right ventricle, they will always have deoxygenated blood, and the left part of the heart, the left atria and the left ventricle, they will always have oxygenated blood. These 2 atria, the right and left atria, in the middle, the interauricular septum, there is an oval depression. Now this oval depression between them is called as the fossa ovalis. This fossa ovalis, which is the oval depression present in the interauricular septum, it is a remnant of foramen ovale. Now this foramen ovale, what is the meaning of foramen? It is nothing but an opening or oval opening which was present in the fetus. So in fetal life, the heart is not well developed. During that time, there is an opening between the right and the left atria. That opening is foramen ovale, and after birth, this opening gradually closes and there is left a depression. This depression, this oval depression, is fossa ovalis, which is a remnant of foramen ovale. Now here you will find these 2 structures. Now here from the right part, this one is the pulmonary trunk. Pulmonary trunk. As I said you earlier, the right part of the heart will have deoxygenated blood. This deoxygenated blood has to go to the lungs for oxygenation. anything associated with the lungs will have the term pulmonary. So since this blood has to go to the lungs for oxygenation, it will go through this trunk, which is the pulmonary trunk. This part, this structure, this is the aorta. This is the aorta. The aorta is in fact divided into three regions. You will have this ascending aorta, the ascending one. You have the aortic arch, and then you have the descending aorta. So aorta has three parts: the ascending aorta, the aortic arch, and the descending aorta. Now here you can find these three arteries in the aorta, amongst which the first one, this is the left subclavian artery. Left subclavian artery. This one is the left. This is the left common carotid artery. And the last one is the brachiocephalic artery. So the aortic arch has three openings: the left subclavian artery, the left common carotid artery, and the brachiocephalic artery, which lies on the aortic arch. So the aorta has three regions: the ascending aorta, the aortic arch, and the descending aorta, of which the aortic arch has three openings: the left subclavian artery, left common carotid artery, and the brachiocephalic artery. Now this aorta and the pulmonary trunk, these both are connected with each other. They both are joined with each other, and there is present a ligament. This is ligamentum arteriosum. So during the fetal life, there was a ductus arteriosus present between these two, which later on turned into a ligament, ligamentum arteriosum. So remember, what is ligamentum arteriosum? It is nothing but it is a joining which is present between the aorta and the pulmonary trunk. This pulmonary trunk has two openings, as you can see here. This is the right artery and this is the left pulmonary artery. Okay, so right pulmonary artery, left pulmonary artery. Here you have the aorta. These two over here and these two over here, these two are the pulmonary veins. And these two are the right pulmonary veins, the left and the right pulmonary veins. In total, we have 4 pulmonary veins which open into the left atria. These two which you can see over here are the basal part, the ending part of the veins. In fact, actually, all the 4 pulmonary veins, they open into the left atria. They bring oxygenated blood from the lungs. That's the reason the name pulmonary, because it's coming from the lungs. They will bring oxygenated blood from the lungs and it will enter the left atria. There are 4 pulmonary veins. You have to remember this. This is important. The right atrium receives blood from this superior opening and this inferior opening. So this superior opening is the superior vena cava, which will bring blood from upper parts of the body. This inferior opening is the inferior vena cava, which will bring blood from the lower parts of the body. So deoxygenated blood from the upper parts of the body, deoxygenated blood from lower parts of the body will enter the right atrium. As I said you earlier, the right part has the deoxygenated blood, which will come from various parts of the body. Also, the right atrium receives deoxygenated blood from the coronary sinus. The inferior vena cava, which brings blood from lower parts of the body into the right atrium. See, this inferior vena cava is downwards, right? So the blood has chances to flow back. For this reason, there is a valve which is present over here. Now, what is a valve and what are the functions of a valve? A valve will maintain unidirectional flow of blood. It will prevent backward flow of blood. So you should remember the functions of a valve. It will prevent backward flow of blood and it will maintain unidirectional flow of blood. There is a valve which is present in the inferior vena cava. This is the Eustachian valve. Remember the names. Inferior vena cava has a valve which is the Eustachian valve. Similarly, as I said you earlier, there is one more opening, that is the coronary sinus, which brings blood into the right atrium. This coronary sinus also has an opening and it has a valve, that is the Thebasian valve. The Thebasian valve present in the coronary sinus will prevent backward flow of blood from the coronary sinus. Okay, so we have two valves over here. The Thebasian valve is for the coronary sinus. The Eustachian valve is for the inferior vena cava. What is the function of the valve? It will prevent backward flow of blood. Similarly, these two, that is the aorta and the pulmonary trunk, these two also, there are chances of backward flow of blood into the ventricles again. So to prevent that backward flow of blood into the ventricles, these two also have valves present, so that there is unidirectional flow of blood and there is no backward flow. So there are three valves each present in the pulmonary trunk and the aorta. So both of them, they have three semilunar valves present. So there are three semilunar valves each, three in the aorta and three in the pulmonary trunk. What will these semilunar valves do? They will prevent backward flow of blood into the ventricles. Okay, so two valves here and three each over here. Remember one thing, in the right side and in the left side, you have valves present in the atrioventricular septum. Remember this, the right side has three cusps for the right side and two cusps for the left side. So here between the right atria and the right ventricular, you have three cusps present. Okay? This is the tricuspid valve which is present in the right atrioventricular septum. Three cusps are there. Remember, this is the tricuspid valve which is present. Similarly, in the left side, the left atria and the left ventricle, between this you have two cusps. There are two cusps, so this is bicuspid valve. You have tricuspid valve in the right side tricuspid, left side is bicuspid. This bicuspid valve is also called as mitral valve. So mitral valve, bicuspid valve are present on the left side. Tricuspid valve is present on the right side. What are these valves going to do? The same thing. They will prevent backward flow of blood. The blood from the right atria should go into the right ventricle. It should not return back into the right atria. This function, to maintain this unidirectional flow of blood, the function is of the tricuspid valve. Similarly, for the left side, we have the bicuspid or the mitral valve. Okay. Now here in the ventricle, there are few more structures which are left to be understood. In the ventricle, the wall part of the ventricle, you have ridges which are present. The ridges present in the ventricular valve are called as columnae carneae. These columnae carneae are nothing but ridges present on the ventricular valve. Similarly, here you have one more structure. Now this bicuspid or the tricuspid valve, their cusp will be connected like this to the wall of the ventricle. Here you have papillary muscles. Okay, so here you have papillary muscles. Now these thread-like structures which you can see are connecting the cusp with the ventricular valve are nothing but chordae tendineae. Chordae tendineae. Okay, so we have these thread-like structures, chordae tendineae, which connect the cusp, the valve with the papillary muscles, that is the ventricular valve, and here you have ridges. These are the columnae carneae. Similarly, on the right side also, these three cusps will be connected to the papillary muscles of the ventricular wall. Okay, so here also you will have connections. These thread-like structures are nothing but the chordae tendineae. As soon as the ventricle will relax, see the ventricle will relax, these thread-like structures will be stretched, and the walls, the tricuspid, the bicuspid, as soon as the thread are stretched, they will open and the blood from the aorta will flow into the ventricles. Now let's just quickly see how blood flow takes place in the heart. Now these two superior chambers, that is the aorta, and these two inferior chambers, that is the ventricle. See, the right side, we have to remember, it has deoxygenated blood. The left side has the oxygenated blood. The right atria will receive deoxygenated blood from upper parts of the body, from superior vena cava, lower parts of the body through inferior vena cava and the coronary sinus. The deoxygenated blood will come here. The tricuspid valve will open. Blood will flow into the right ventricle. This deoxygenated blood has to go to the lungs for oxygenation. So it will travel through the pulmonary trunk, the right and the left pulmonary artery. It will reach the lung for oxygenation. Now from the lungs, the oxygenated blood will come into the heart again. So from the lungs, the oxygenated blood, since it is coming from the lungs, the word pulmonary. So the pulmonary veins, 4 pulmonary veins will bring oxygenated blood from the lungs into the left aorta. The left aorta will be having oxygenated blood, after which the bicuspid valve will open and the left ventricle will receive the oxygenated blood. Now this oxygenated blood has to go to various parts of the body because they need oxygen to do their activities. Now this oxygenated blood will travel through the aorta to various parts of the body. I hope you have understood about the blood supply, the blood flow which takes place in the heart. I hope you understood the structure of the heart, the anatomy and the internal structure. Do like, share and subscribe. And in the comment section, please give your suggestions on which topics you need the next videos for. Thank you.